A millionaire finds his son kneeling on the floor, learning to clean from the housekeeper. The housekeeper teaches the boy how to clean the floor, not imagining the man would get furious. The boy, embarrassed and confused, tries to explain, but his words are ignored by the millionaire. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Stay tuned. The morning sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Harrison estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. The light bounced off crystal chandeliers and illuminated the meticulously arranged fresh flowers that adorned every corner of the sprawling mansion. It was a perfect spring day in one of America's wealthiest zip codes, and Maxwell Harrison was already on his third business call of the morning. "Listen, Peterson, I don't care what the board thinks. We're acquiring that company by the end of the quarter. Make it happen." Maxwell ended the call with a firm tap on his smartphone screen. At 52, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never accepted failure as an option. His salt-and-pepper hair was perfectly styled, his custom Tom Ford suit impeccably tailored to his tall frame. From his home office window, Maxwell could see gardeners tending to the immaculate landscape surrounding the Olympic-sized pool. Beyond, that lay the tennis court, where his wife Victoria would soon be meeting her instructor for her twice-weekly lesson. Not that she needed it. Victoria Harrison had been a semi-professional player in her youth, but maintaining the appearance of constant self-improvement was part of the carefully curated image the Harrisons presented to their social circle. "Mr. Harrison." A soft knock accompanied the gentle voice. "I've brought your coffee." "Come in, Lucia," Maxwell called, not bothering to look up from the financial reports spread across his mahogany desk. Lucia Martinez entered quietly, placing the steaming cup of single-origin Ethiopian coffee on a coaster. At 43, Lucia had been working for the Harrison family for nearly 7 years. She wore the simple black uniform and white apron that Victoria insisted upon for all household staff, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Though she blended into the background of the Harrison household by design, her warm brown eyes missed nothing. "Will there be anything else, sir?" she asked, her accent subtle but noticeable. Maxwell glanced up briefly. "That's all for now." As Lucia exited, Victoria swept into the office, her tennis outfit pristine and white, not a strand of her blonde hair out of place. "Darling, remember, we have the Whitman Foundation Gala tonight. Your tuxedo has been pressed, and I've selected the Cartier cufflinks to match my necklace." Maxwell nodded absently. "Right. I'll be ready by 7. And don't forget, Penelope's ballet recital is tomorrow afternoon. I've had Jeffries clear your schedule." At the mention of his daughter, Maxwell's expression softened slightly. "How is she doing with the new instructor?" "Madame Dubois says she's progressing beautifully. She'll be perfect tomorrow, naturally." Victoria's tone left no room for any other possibility. Their 16-year-old daughter had been enrolled in the finest arts programs since she could walk. "Oh, and Tyler's science project won first place yesterday." This caught Maxwell's attention. "Did it? That's excellent." A rare smile crossed his face. "Where is he?" "Upstairs in his room, I imagine, playing with those robots again." Victoria's voice carried a hint of dismissal. "I don't understand his fascination with building things when he could simply have anything bought for him." Down the hall, 10-year-old Tyler Harrison sat cross-legged on his bedroom floor, surrounded by electronic components, screwdrivers, and wires. Unlike his meticulously tidy sister, Tyler's room was a controlled chaos of books, science kits, and half-completed inventions. His sandy brown hair fell across his forehead as he concentrated on connecting a small motor to a battery pack. Gentle knock interrupted his focus. "Tyler, may I come in?" Lucia's voice came through the door. "Sure, Lucia," Tyler called, not looking up from his project. Lucia entered carrying a tray with a glass of orange juice and a sandwich. "You missed breakfast again," she said with gentle reproach. "Young scientists need fuel for their brilliant minds." Tyler looked up with a grin that revealed a missing front tooth. "I was too excited to finish this. Look, Lucia, it's going to be a robot that can sort colored blocks," he demonstrated proudly, connecting the final wire. "Very impressive," Lucia said, setting down the tray and genuinely admiring the child's handiwork. You have such clever hands. Dad says I should focus more on math and business if I want to take over Harrison Investments someday, Tyler said, his enthusiasm dimming slightly. Lucia sat on the edge of his bed. And what do you want to do? Tyler shrugged. I just like making things work. He picked up half the sandwich and took a bite. These are the best sandwiches ever, Lucia. How come yours taste better than when Chef Marcel makes them? Lucia laughed. The secret ingredient is love, mijo. Tyler tilted his head. And what does mijo? I mean, it means my son in Spanish. It's a term of affection, Lucia explained. Now eat your lunch and don't forget to clean up before your tutor arrives at 2. As Lucia gathered some discarded clothes from the floor, Tyler watched her work. Lucia, were you always a housekeeper? The question caught her off guard. No, Carino, in my country I was a teacher. Mathematics, actually. Tyler's eyes widened. Really? Why aren't you a teacher here? Lucia smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. Sometimes life takes us on unexpected journeys, but I am grateful for this job. It allowed me to put my daughter through college. You have a daughter? Yes, Elena. She's studying computer engineering at MIT now. Tyler was clearly impressed. That's where I want to go. Could I meet her sometime? Perhaps, Lucia said with a warm smile. Now finish your lunch. Later that evening, the Harrison mansion buzzed with activity as Maxwell and Victoria prepared for the gala. Penelope floated through the halls in designer jeans, her long blonde hair identical to her mother's, constantly checking her social media on her latest model smartphone. Tyler had been banished to his room with instructions to remain quiet, while important guests arrived for pre-gala cocktails. But curiosity drew him to the grand staircase, where he sat between the banisters, watching the glittering crowd below. Should you be here, young master? Came a soft voice behind him. Tyler turned to find Lucia carrying fresh towels. I'm just watching, he whispered. They all look like they're wearing costumes. Lucia suppressed a smile. Your parents would want you in your room. They don't even notice I'm here, Tyler said with the frank honesty of childhood. Dad's too busy impressing everyone, and Mom's making sure everything's perfect. As if on cue, Victoria's voice carried up from below. Lucia, we need more. Ice for the west sitting room immediately. I'll be right there, Mrs. Harrison, Lucia called back. She gave Tyler a gentle nudge. Back to your room now before you're spotted. Tyler reluctantly stood. Lucia? Yes. Will you teach me something tomorrow? Something you used to teach in your classroom? Lucia smiled. We'll see. Now off you go. As Tyler retreated to his room, he could hear his father's booming laugh from below, the one reserved for business associates and potential donors. It was different from the rare chuckles Tyler sometimes earned with a clever observation or good grade. Those were quieter, more genuine. In his room, surrounded by books and gadgets that could never fill the space of actual parental attention, Tyler opened his science notebook and began sketching a new invention. This one, he decided, would be for Lucia, something to make her work easier. After all, she was the only one who really saw him in this golden cage they called home. Outside, the manicured gardens gleamed under strategic landscape lighting, and luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway. Inside the mansion's walls, beneath, the veneer of perfect family life, invisible currents were already beginning to shift. The contrasts between wealth and worth, between possession and purpose, were drawing subtle lines that would soon become fractures in the carefully constructed world Maxwell Harrison had built. The Saturday morning sun streamed through the east-facing windows of the Harrison mansion, bathing the marble floors in golden light. Most of the household staff had the weekend off, but Lucia Martinez had agreed to work an extra shift. The gala the previous night had left the mansion in need of additional attention, and the extra pay would help with Elena's textbook expenses for the upcoming semester. Lucia moved methodically through the grand entryway, polishing the marble floor with practiced efficiency. Her movements were almost meditative, developed through years of physical labor. Though the work was demanding, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Each task, no matter how menial it might seem to the Harrisons, She performed with care and attention. "Lucia, what are you doing?" She looked up to find Tyler standing at the foot of the grand staircase, still in his pajamas, his hair tousled from sleep. He clutched a thick book about robotics under one arm. "Good morning, Tyler," she smiled. "I'm just finishing the floors. Your parents and sister are still asleep after last night's event." Tyler approached cautiously, careful not to step on the freshly polished surface. "It looks super shiny. How do you make it like that?" "With the right cleaner, proper technique, and a lot of elbow grease," Lucia explained, demonstrating the circular motion she used with the polishing cloth. Tyler set his book down on a nearby chair and crouched beside her. "Can I try?" Lucia hesitated. "I don't think your mother would approve." "Please." Tyler's eyes lit up with genuine curiosity. "I want to learn how things work. It's like science, isn't it? Chemical reactions and friction and stuff." Lucia couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. "Well, I suppose there is a bit of science to it." She handed him a clean cloth. "Here, let me show you. Small circular motions like this." Tyler mimicked her movements, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's harder than it looks," he admitted after a minute. "Most valuable work is," Lucia replied gently. "The things that seem simple often require the most skill when done properly." For the next 15 minutes they worked side by side. Lucia explained the composition of the special marble cleaner, why certain motions were more effective than others, and how to test if the surface was truly clean. Tyler listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and beaming with pride when he managed to create a gleaming patch of floor. "You know," Lucia said quietly, "when I was a girl in Arizona, my mother cleaned houses to support our family after my father became ill. She would take me with her sometimes during school breaks. She taught me that there is honor in all work done well." Tyler nodded solemnly. "I think so too. Dad always says work is important, but—" He trailed off, searching for words. "But what?" "Carino. He only seems to care about the kind of work that makes lots of money," Tyler finished. "But money doesn't build robots or clean floors or make sandwiches that taste like yours." Lucia's eyes softened. "Different kinds of work have different kinds of value. Some cannot be measured in dollars." Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. "Tyler, where are you, son?" Maxwell Harrison's voice called out. Before either could react, Maxwell appeared in the entryway, dressed in designer casual wear, pressed khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than Lucia's weekly salary. He stopped abruptly at the sight before him, his son on his knees beside the housekeeper, both with polishing cloths in hand. "What is going on here?" Maxwell's voice was dangerously quiet. Tyler jumped to his feet. "Dad, I was just helping Lucia clean the marble. Did you know you have to use special—" "Tyler, go upstairs to your room now." Maxwell's tone left no room for argument. "But Dad—" "Now, Tyler." The boy's shoulders slumped. He handed the cloth back to Lucia, avoiding her eyes. "Thanks for showing me," he mumbled before trudging up the staircase, each step heavy with disappointment. Once Tyler was out of earshot, Maxwell turned his cold gaze to Lucia. "Ms. Martinez, may I remind you that you are employed to clean this house, not to recruit my children to do your job for you." Lucia stood, her expression composed despite the churning in her stomach. "With all due respect, Mr. Harrison, Tyler was curious. He asked to learn." "I don't care what he asked," Maxwell cut in. "My son is not going to be scrubbing floors like a—" He caught himself, but his implication hung in the air between them. "Like someone beneath you," Lucia finished calmly, though her hands trembled slightly at her sides. Maxwell's jaw tightened. "My son is being educated for leadership, Ms. Martinez. I've worked too hard to give him every advantage, to ensure he never has to struggle like you did," Lucia ventured. A flicker of surprise crossed Maxwell's face. "What do you know about my background?" "Only what Mrs. Harrison mentioned once, that you came from modest beginnings, that you built your fortune yourself." Lucia maintained eye contact, her dignity intact. "Perhaps that is why I thought Tyler might benefit from understanding that all honest work has value." For a moment, something unreadable crossed Maxwell's expression, a shadow of recognition, perhaps even uncertainty. but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I'll overlook this incident," he said coldly. "But in the future, remember your place in this household. Tyler has tutors and coaches for his education. Your responsibilities are clearly outlined in your employment contract." "Of course, Mr. Harrison." Lucia's voice was steady, professional, but inside she felt a deep sadness, not for herself, but for the distance she saw between this powerful man and his curious, kind-hearted son. After Maxwell left, Lucia finished the floors in silence, her thoughts with Tyler. She knew the boy would be confused and hurt by his father's reaction. She had seen it countless times in her years, working for wealthy families, children caught between their natural curiosity about the world and the rigid expectations placed upon them by parents determined to reproduce their own success. Upstairs in his bedroom, Tyler sat on his window seat staring out at the manicured gardens. His robotics book lay forgotten beside him. He couldn't understand why his father had been so angry. It was just cleaning. He'd learned more in 15 minutes with Lucia than he had in his last 3 science tutoring sessions. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Tyler, it's me," came his sister's voice. Penelope entered, already dressed in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater despite the early hour. At 16, she had mastered the art of looking effortlessly perfect at all times, a skill their mother had cultivated in her daughter from an early age. "I heard Dad yelling," she said, sitting beside him on the window seat. "What happened?" Tyler shrugged. "I was helping Lucia clean the floors. Dad got mad." Penelope sighed. "You know how Dad is about that stuff." "But why? It's just cleaning." "It's not about the cleaning, Ty." Penelope gave him a sad smile that made her look older than her years. "It's about what people like us are supposed to do and not do." "That's stupid," Tyler muttered. "Maybe." Penelope's fingers idly played with the expensive charm bracelet on her wrist. "But that's how it works in Dad's world." "I don't want to be in that world then," Tyler declared with the absolute conviction of childhood. Penelope ruffled his hair affectionately. "You might not have a choice. I used to think like you know." "You did?" "Mm-hmm. When I was 9, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I told Mom, and she said it was a lovely hobby, but not a suitable career for a Harrison." "But you love animals, and now I have riding lessons twice a week and volunteer at charity events for the animal shelter instead." Penelope's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's easier to just go with it, Ty. Trust me." But Tyler wasn't convinced. When Penelope left for her Saturday yoga session, he sat at his desk and pulled out his invention notebook. On a fresh page, he began designing a floor polishing robot, carefully noting everything Lucia had taught him about proper cleaning techniques. If his father wouldn't let him learn from Lucia directly, he would find another way. Meanwhile, downstairs in the kitchen, Lucia was preparing a light lunch for the family. Victoria had emerged from her bedroom and was sitting at the island counter, scrolling through her tablet and occasionally dictating notes to her personal assistant about upcoming charity events. "Ms. Martinez," Victoria said without looking up. "Maxwell mentioned an incident with Tyler this morning." Lucia kept her expression neutral as she sliced organic vegetables for a salad. "Yes, Mrs. Harrison, I apologize if I overstepped." Victoria waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Tyler is at a difficult age. He's curious about everything, especially things that aren't appropriate for someone of his position." She took a delicate sip of her green smoothie. "Maxwell and I are doing everything possible to provide him with the right influences. You understand, don't you?" "Of course, Mrs. Harrison," Lucia replied diplomatically. "Good." Victoria returned to her tablet. "Oh, and we'll need dinner prepared for 4 tonight. Maxwell's business associate, Mr. Whitman, is joining us." As Victoria glided out of the kitchen, Lucia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The conversation had gone better than expected, but the underlying message was clear. Know your place. It was a message she had heard countless times throughout her life, in various forms and from various sources. But Lucia knew something the Harrisons didn't. Real worth wasn't determined by bank accounts or social standing. She had seen millionaires who couldn't manage their own households when crisis struck, and she had known poor families rich in resilience and ingenuity. She thought of her own daughter Elena, who had inherited her mother's strength and determination. Despite all obstacles, Elena was thriving at one of the world's most prestigious universities. Lucia continued preparing lunch, her movements precise and practiced. She thought of Tyler with his bright, inquisitive mind and generous heart. She feared what might happen to that spirit if it was continually stifled by his parents' narrow vision of success. As afternoon turned to evening, Maxwell's mood had not improved. The tension in the household was palpable as the family prepared to receive their dinner guest. Tyler had been instructed to join them, dressed appropriately in clothes Victoria had selected. As he descended the staircase in his miniature blazer and pressed khakis, Tyler felt like he was wearing a costume for a role he wasn't sure he wanted to play. 3 weeks had passed since the floor cleaning incident, and the atmosphere in the Harrison mansion remained strained. Maxwell had thrown himself even more deeply into his work, often not returning home until well after Tyler had gone to bed. When father and son did interact, their conversations were stilted and formal, revolving around Tyler's academic progress and his scheduled activities. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, dark clouds gathered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maxwell's home office. The financial report spread across his desk painted an equally stormy picture. Harrison Investments was facing its first significant crisis under his leadership. "The Westlake acquisition is becoming problematic," James Whitman said, leaning back in the leather chair across from Maxwell's desk. As Maxwell's oldest friend and business partner, James was the only person permitted to speak so frankly. "The numbers don't add up, Max. Something's off in their financials." Maxwell pinched the bridge of his nose. "We're too deep into this to back out now. The board is expecting this acquisition to boost our third-quarter earnings. And if it doesn't?" James raised an eyebrow. "If their assets are overvalued, as I suspect, we could be looking at serious losses." "Then we find a way to make it work," Maxwell snapped, his tone allowing no room for doubt. "I didn't build this company by backing down from challenges." James sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of his friend's jaw. "At least let the forensic accountants finish their review before we proceed further." "Fine," Maxwell conceded. "But this deal is happening, James. I've staked too much on it." Outside the office door, Victoria paused, having overheard the tense exchange. Her perfectly composed features revealed nothing, but her grip tightened on the charity gala invitation she'd been about to show Maxwell. After a moment's hesitation, she turned and walked silently back down the hallway. In the kitchen, Lucia was preparing a fresh batch of chocolate chip cookies, Tyler's favorite. The boy had seemed increasingly withdrawn lately, and she hoped the small treat might brighten his mood. As she mixed the dough, Eleanor's latest email played in her mind. Her daughter was thriving at MIT, recently selected for a prestigious internship with a tech company. Pride swelled in Lucia's heart, sweetened by the knowledge that her years of sacrifice had helped make Elena's success possible. The sound of small footsteps interrupted her thoughts as Tyler entered the kitchen, his backpack dragging behind him. "Something smells amazing," he said, his first genuine smile in days lighting up his face. "Chocolate chip cookies," Lucia replied, sliding the first batch from the oven. "Would you like one?" "They need to cool a bit first." Tyler hoisted himself onto a stool at the counter. "Yes, please." He watched as Lucia expertly transferred the cookies to a cooling rack. "How do you know when they're perfect? They always come out just right when you make them." "Practice," Lucia answered, "and paying attention to the little details, how the dough feels, how the edges begin to brown." She slid a slightly cooled cookie onto a napkin for him. "So how was school today?" Tyler's enthusiasm dimmed. "Fine, I guess. We started our science fair projects. I wanted to do a robot that could solve simple problems, but Ms. Patterson said that was too advanced." "What did she suggest instead?" "A volcano." Tyler rolled his eyes. "Everyone does volcanoes." Lucia suppressed a smile. "Perhaps you could find a way to make your volcano special?" Tyler took a thoughtful bite of his cookie. "Maybe, but it's not the same. He hesitated, then added in a quieter voice, "Dad probably won't come to the science fair anyway. He missed the last one." Lucia's heart ached for the boy. "Your father is very busy with work." "He's always busy," Tyler said, the simple statement heavy with resignation. "Mom, too. She's going to some fancy charity thing the day of the science fair." Before Lucia could respond, Victoria swept into the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, absolutely, we'll increase our donation to the platinum level," she was saying. "The Harrison family is committed to supporting children's education in underserved communities." She nodded to Lucia and Tyler without interrupting her conversation, then opened the refrigerator to retrieve a bottle of sparkling water. As she turned to leave, she noticed the cookies and paused long enough to mouth "no sweets before dinner" to Lucia, while pointing at Tyler. Once Victoria had left, Tyler sighed dramatically. "See what I mean?" Lucia began cleaning up the baking supplies. "Your parents show their care in different ways, Tyler. Your mother's charity work helps many children." "Just not her own," Tyler muttered, then immediately looked guilty. "That was mean, I shouldn't have said that." "It's okay to have feelings," Lucia said gently, "even difficult ones." Tyler absently broke his half-eaten cookie into smaller pieces. "Lucia, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy? Like with your job and everything?" The unexpected question caught Lucia off guard. "Why do you ask?" Tyler shrugged. "You're smart. You told me you were a math teacher before, but now you clean and cook for us. Doesn't that make you sad?" Lucia considered her answer carefully. "Happiness comes from many sources, Tyler. I take pride in doing my work well. I find joy in small moments, like baking cookies with you. And I am deeply grateful that my job allowed me to give my daughter opportunities I never had." "Like college?" "Yes, like college. Elena graduates next year." Tyler brightened. "Will she come visit when she graduates? I still want to meet her." "Perhaps," Lucia smiled. "Now you should start your homework before dinner." As Tyler gathered his backpack, the sound of raised voices drifted from Maxwell's office. Tyler froze, his eyes widening. Though they couldn't make out the words, the tension was unmistakable. "Dad sounds really angry," Tyler whispered. Lucia gently guided him toward the doorway. "Adult business can be stressful sometimes, nothing for you to worry about." But the worried look didn't leave Tyler's face as he reluctantly headed upstairs. Later that evening, after the family had finished a silent dinner, Maxwell distracted and Victoria making forced conversation, Lucia was finishing her duties in the upstairs hallway when she overheard voices from the master bedroom. "I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this," Victoria was saying, her voice tight with frustration. "If the Westlake deal is risky, why not explore other options?" "Because I've already committed," Maxwell replied sharply. "The board, our investors, the market, they're all expecting this acquisition to go through. And if James is right, if there are problems with their financials, then I'll handle it," Maxwell snapped. "I always do." "At what cost?" Victoria's voice had dropped to a hiss. "Your father worked himself into an early grave for his company. Is that what you want?" "Don't bring my father into this," Maxwell warned. "Why not? You're becoming just like him, obsessed with image and success, too busy building your empire to notice what's happening right in front of you." "What's that supposed to mean?" Victoria laughed, a bitter sound devoid of humor. "When was the last time you had a real conversation with Tyler? Do you have any idea what's going on in his life? He won first place in his math competition last week. Did you even know that?" A heavy silence followed. "I have a meeting," Maxwell finally said, his voice cold. "Don't wait up." Lucia quickly moved down the hallway before the bedroom door opened. As she continued her work, she couldn't help but worry about the tensions fracturing this family from within. That night, long after the household had fallen silent, Maxwell sat alone in his office, a glass of bourbon in hand. Financial reports and acquisition documents surrounded him, but his gaze was fixed on a small framed photograph on his desk, the only personal item in the otherwise sterile space. In it, a much younger Maxwell stood beside his father outside a modest brick house, both wearing suits that had clearly been saved for special occasions. Maxwell picked up the photo, studying his father's proud expression. Warren Harrison had been a mid-level banking manager who had sacrificed everything to give his son opportunities. Maxwell had exceeded even his father's ambitious dreams, building a financial empire that dwarfed the small community bank where Warren had spent his career. Yet tonight, for the first time in years, Maxwell found himself questioning the path he had chosen. Victoria's words echoed uncomfortably in his mind. Was he becoming like his father in the worst ways? Warren had rarely been present, his devotion to professional advancement overshadowing family life. Maxwell had sworn he would be different. He would achieve success without the sacrifices his father had made. But sitting alone in his massive home with his family sleeping in distant wings, Maxwell was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. He had replicated his father's mistakes, just on a grander scale. The realization brought no comfort, only a hollow feeling in his chest that not even the expensive bourbon could fill. Maxwell set down the photo and reached for his phone, scrolling through his calendar. Perhaps he could reschedule some meetings to attend Tyler's science fair. As he searched for the date, another notification appeared on his screen. An urgent email from the forensic accountants reviewing the Westlake deal. With a sense of foreboding, Maxwell opened the message. What he read caused his blood to run cold. The preliminary report confirmed James's suspicions, and worse, there were significant irregularities in Westlake's financial statements. What had appeared to be a promising acquisition now looked like a potential disaster that could threaten everything Maxwell had built. He set down his phone, his mind racing with implications. For the first time in his career, Maxwell Harrison faced a challenge he wasn't certain he could overcome through sheer force of will. The foundation of his carefully constructed world had begun to crack, and he wasn't sure how to hold it together. The thunderstorm that had threatened Greenwich for days finally broke on a Friday morning, sending sheets of rain against the windows of the Harrison mansion. The weather matched Maxwell's mood as he sat in his home office, tie loosened, hair disheveled from repeatedly running his hands through it. The Westlake crisis had escalated beyond his worst fears. What had begun as financial irregularities now appeared to be systematic fraud, and Harrison Investments was deeply entangled. Maxwell's phone rang for what felt like the 100th time that morning. This time he couldn't ignore it. The caller ID showed the board chairman's name. Lawrence, Maxwell answered, struggling to keep his voice steady. Maxwell, the emergency board meeting has been moved up to 1 o'clock. Lawrence Grayson's normally jovial voice was clipped and formal. I strongly suggest you come prepared with a comprehensive plan to address this situation. Maxwell closed his eyes briefly. I'll be there. And Maxwell, the Wall Street Journal is running a story in tomorrow's edition. We need to get ahead of this. After the call ended, Maxwell sat motionless, staring at the rain lashing against the windows. Everything he had built over the past 2 decades was in jeopardy. The financial world was unforgiving of mistakes, especially ones of this magnitude. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Enter, he called, hastily straightening his tie. To his surprise, it was Lucia who stepped into the office, carrying a tray with coffee and a light breakfast. Excuse me. Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison mentioned you hadn't eaten since yesterday, so I took the liberty of bringing you something. Maxwell glanced at his watch, shocked to realize it was already past 10 in the morning. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Just leave it there. Lucia placed the tray on a side table and turned to go, but hesitated at the door. Is there anything else you need, sir? Maxwell was about to dismiss her when something made him pause. In all the years Lucia had worked for his family, he had rarely had a real conversation with her. She was simply part of the household machinery that kept his life running smoothly while he focused on important matters. Yet now, as his professional world teetered on the brink of collapse, he found himself craving human connection, even from someone he had always regarded as merely staff. Ms. Martinez, he said suddenly, how do you do it? Lucia turned, confusion evident on her face. I'm sorry, sir. How do you... Maxwell gestured vaguely, struggling to articulate his question. How do you maintain your dignity when life doesn't go as planned? A flicker of surprise crossed Lucia's features. She seemed to weigh her response carefully. With respect, Mr. Harrison, dignity isn't something that circumstances give or take away. It comes from how we face those circumstances, whether we act with integrity, kindness, and resilience. Her words hit Maxwell with unexpected force. When had he last acted with true integrity, beyond what was legally required? When had kindness factored into his business decisions? "Your daughter," Maxwell said, recalling fragments of household conversations he'd overheard over the years. "She's at a prestigious university, isn't she?" "Yes, sir. MIT, computer engineering." "That's quite an achievement." "It is," Lucia agreed, a hint of pride warming her voice. "Elena worked very hard for her scholarship, and I worked hard to provide the rest." "And before coming to America, you were a teacher?" Lucia nodded, her expression revealing mild surprise. That he knew this detail. "Mathematics, yes. In my country, the career had respect but very little financial reward." "So you came here and became a housekeeper instead. Wasn't that difficult?" Maxwell couldn't imagine giving up a professional identity like that. "Of course it was difficult," Lucia said simply, "but not as difficult as watching my daughter's potential go unfulfilled. Sometimes, Mr. Harrison, our personal pride must take a back seat to our greater purpose." Maxwell stared at her, suddenly seeing not just a housekeeper but a woman of remarkable strength and wisdom. She had sacrificed her professional identity for her daughter, while what was he sacrificing his family for? "Thank you, Ms. Martinez," he said quietly. "That will be all." After Lucia left, Maxwell turned to the coffee she had brought, prepared exactly as he liked it, of course. How had she known his preference? Had Victoria told her, or had Lucia simply observed over the years, paying attention to details he took for granted? Maxwell's phone buzzed with another urgent message, dragging him back to the crisis at hand. He had less than 3 hours to prepare for the board meeting that might end his career. The board meeting was every bit as brutal as Maxwell had anticipated. For 4 excruciating hours he faced questioning from board members whose expressions ranged from disappointment to barely concealed fury. The forensic accountant's report was damning. The Westlake Company had systematically misrepresented its assets and liabilities, creating a financial house of cards that Harrison Investments was now irrevocably tied to. "The question before us," Lawrence Grayson said, addressing the room after the presentations had concluded, "is how Harrison Investments moves forward from this catastrophe. With new leadership," Roger Tillman, always Maxwell's harshest critic on the board, said flatly. "This happened on Harrison's watch. The shareholders will demand accountability." Maxwell sat perfectly still, his face a mask of composure, while his heart hammered against his ribs. Everything he had worked for was slipping away, and the worst part was that he couldn't even argue against it. The warning signs had been there, James had tried to tell him, but Maxwell's pride and stubbornness had blinded him. After much debate, the board reached its decision. Maxwell would step down as CEO, effective immediately. He would remain as chairman of the board, a largely ceremonial role that acknowledged his status as founder, while James Whitman would take over day-to-day operations as interim CEO. The drive home from Manhattan to Greenwich was a blur. Rain continued to pound against the windshield of Maxwell's Bentley as evening fell. For the first time in his adult life, Maxwell Harrison had failed publicly and catastrophically. Tomorrow, his name would be splashed across the financial press, his judgment questioned, his reputation tarnished. When he arrived home, the mansion was unusually quiet. Victoria had taken Penelope to a weekend ballet workshop in Boston, leaving only Tyler and the household staff at home. Maxwell found himself relieved. He couldn't face Victoria's disappointment or Penelope's questions just yet. He made his way to the kitchen, seeking something stronger than the coffee Lucia had brought him that morning. To his surprise, he found Tyler sitting at the kitchen island, surrounded by papers, markers, and what appeared to be the early stages of a science project. "Dad!" Tyler looked up, startled. "You're home early." Maxwell glanced at his watch. It was past 8 in the evening, hardly early by most standards, but certainly unusual for him. "I am. What are you working on there?" My science fair project. Tyler explained, his initial surprise giving way to enthusiasm. I'm not doing a volcano after all. I'm studying how different cleaning solutions affect different surfaces. He gestured to several small tiles arranged in front of him. Lucia helped me get some samples of marble, granite, and ceramic. The mention of Lucia, Maxwell felt a twinge of something unfamiliar, perhaps respect or even gratitude. That sounds interesting. More practical than a volcano, certainly. That's what I thought, Tyler beamed, clearly pleased by his father's approval. Lucia says understanding the chemistry of everyday things is just as important as big scientific discoveries. Maxwell nodded, taking a seat across from his son. For the first time in ages, he really looked at Tyler, not as the heir to the Harrison legacy, but as a bright 10-year-old boy with his own interests and ideas. She's right about that. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of the continuing storm. "Dad?" Tyler finally asked, his voice small. "Are you okay? You look different." Maxwell considered deflecting the question with his usual just business response, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the genuine concern in his son's eyes, or perhaps it was the realization that his old patterns had led him to this breaking point. "No, Tyler, I'm not okay," he admitted softly. "I made some mistakes at work. Big ones." Tyler's eyes widened, not with disappointment as Maxwell had feared, but with surprise at the rare moment of vulnerability from his father. "What kind of mistakes?" Tyler asked. Maxwell sighed, considering how to explain corporate malfeasance to a 10-year-old. "I trusted the wrong people. I didn't listen to good advice because I was too proud, and now my company, our family's company, is in trouble." Tyler absorbed this information thoughtfully. "Can you fix it?" "Some of it, not all." Maxwell ran a hand over his face. "I've lost my position as CEO." "What does that mean? Will we have to move? Will I have to change schools?" Fear crept into Tyler's voice. No, Maxwell assured him quickly. "We'll be fine financially. This is more about—" He searched for the words about legacy and reputation. Tyler seemed to consider this. "Mum says reputation is everything." "Your mother and I have always believed that," Maxwell acknowledged, "but I'm starting to think maybe we've been measuring the wrong things." Outside, a particularly loud thunderclap shook the windows. Tyler jumped slightly, then looked embarrassed. "Still not a fan of storms, huh?" Maxwell asked, remembering how his son had always been frightened of thunder as a younger child. Tyler shook his head. "Lucia says it's just the clouds having a conversation, but I still don't like it when they yell." Maxwell smiled, a genuine smile for the first time that day. "That's a good way of looking at it." Before Tyler could respond, the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The kitchen was plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of emergency lights along the baseboards. "Dad!" Tyler's voice was tight with fear. "It's all right," Maxwell said, reaching for his phone to activate the flashlight. "Just a power outage from the storm. The generator should kick in soon." But as seconds stretched into minutes with no sign of the backup generator activating, Maxwell frowned. The mansion was equipped with a state-of-the-art system that should have restored power almost immediately. "Wait here," he told Tyler, moving cautiously toward the utility room off the kitchen. Just then, Lucia appeared in the doorway, holding a battery-powered lantern. "Mr. Harrison, Tyler," she said calmly. "Is everyone all right?" "We're fine," Maxwell assured her. "But the generator hasn't kicked in." "I was just coming to check on that," Lucia said. "The storm has caused flooding in the basement, and I'm concerned about the generator system." Maxwell's concern deepened. "Flooding? How bad?" "I cannot tell in the dark, but the water was rising quickly when I came upstairs." "I should check it out," Maxwell decided, taking the lantern from Lucia. "Tyler, stay here with Ms. Martinez." "Actually, sir," Lucia interjected, "the basement stairs might not be safe if the flooding is significant. Perhaps we should call emergency services instead." Maxwell hesitated, torn between his instinct to take charge and the wisdom in Lucia's cautious approach. In his old life, just this morning, in fact, he would have dismissed her concern and ploughed ahead with his own solution. But his confidence had been shaken, his certainty in his own judgment severely undermined. "You're right," he conceded, reaching for his phone again. "Let's call for help." As Maxwell made the call, Tyler moved closer to Lucia, who placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. The emergency dispatcher advised them to remain on the upper floors of the house until help arrived, as the combination of flooding and electrical systems could be dangerous. "It might be a while before they can reach us," Maxwell explained after ending the call. "The storm has downed trees across several roads, and emergency services are stretched thin." "We should gather some supplies," Lucia suggested practically. "More flashlights, blankets, water. The temperature will drop without the heating system." "I'll help," Tyler volunteered, eager to be useful. Maxwell watched as Lucia and Tyler worked together with surprising efficiency, gathering emergency supplies from various parts of the house. There was an easy rapport between them, a mutual respect that Maxwell realized had been developing for years, while he was too busy to notice. As the night wore on, the three of them settled in the family room, which had the advantage of a fireplace. Maxwell, following Lucia's instructions, managed to build a fire, something he hadn't done since Boy Scouts decades ago. The dancing flames cast a warm glow over the room, creating a cozy atmosphere despite the circumstances. "I'm starving," Tyler announced after a while. "Can we cook something?" "The stove won't work without electricity," Maxwell pointed out. "We can make sandwiches," Lucia suggested. "There's bread and cold cuts in the refrigerator, which should still be cold enough." "I'll help," Tyler said, jumping up. To Maxwell's surprise, he found himself following them to the kitchen. Under Lucia's guidance, they assembled sandwiches by lantern light, working together in a way the Harrison family rarely did. There was something oddly satisfying about the simple task, about creating something with his own hands, rather than just directing others to do it for him. As they ate their makeshift dinner, Tyler regaled them with stories from school, his animated expressions illuminated by the lantern light. Maxwell realized with a pang how little he knew about his son's daily life, how many of these stories he had missed while focused on building and maintaining his empire. "Ms. Martinez," Maxwell said, during a lull in the conversation, "Tyler mentioned you've been helping him with his science project." Lucia glanced at him cautiously, perhaps expecting a reprimand. "Yes, Mr. Harrison. Tyler has been very interested in the chemistry of cleaning products. It's actually quite sophisticated science." "I can see that," Maxwell nodded. "And please, under the circumstances, I think you can call me Maxwell." Lucia's surprise was evident, but she nodded graciously. "Very well, Maxwell." "Dad," Tyler interjected, "Lucia knows so much about science and math. Did you know she was the math teacher before she came here?" "I did, actually," Maxwell replied, meeting Lucia's gaze. "She must have been an excellent teacher." The conversation flowed more easily after that, the usual barriers of employer and employee temporarily suspended by the extraordinary circumstances. As the night deepened and Tyler eventually fell asleep, on the couch wrapped in blankets, Maxwell found himself engaging in a real conversation with Lucia for the first time. "How long have you been in this country?" he asked quietly, mindful of Tyler's steady breathing nearby. 12 years, Lucia replied. "Elena was 11 when we came. My husband had passed away, and there were few opportunities for us in our hometown." Maxwell nodded, a new respect growing for the quiet strength of this woman who had navigated so many challenges. It couldn't have been easy, starting over in a new country. "It wasn't," Lucia acknowledged, "but necessary things rarely are easy." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the fire. "I lost my job today," Maxwell said suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. Lucia's expression remained composed, but her eyes reflected understanding rather than judgment. "I'm sorry to hear that." "It was my own fault," Maxwell continued, finding it oddly cathartic to speak the truth aloud. "I was too proud, too certain I knew best. I ignored warnings, dismissed concerns." He shook his head ruefully. "The very qualities that helped me build my company ultimately led to my downfall." "Perhaps," Lucia said thoughtfully, But those same qualities, determination, confidence, vision, can also help you rebuild. Maxwell looked at her in surprise. You think I can recover from this? I think, Lucia said carefully, that a man who built something from nothing once can do it again, perhaps this time with greater wisdom and perspective. Her words resonated with something deep inside Maxwell. For the first time since the crisis began, he felt a flicker of hope, not for restoring his old life exactly as it was, but for creating something new and potentially better. As they continued talking through the night, Maxwell began to see Lucia not as the help, but as a remarkably insightful woman who had been observing his family for years with a clarity he had lacked. Her perspective on Tyler's strengths and needs, on Victoria's underlying anxieties, even on Penelope's carefully concealed doubts about her path in life, all of it rang true in ways that made Maxwell realize how disconnected he had become from his own family. 3 months after the stormy night that had changed everything, the Harrison mansion buzzed with unusual activity. Gone were the formal staff meetings and strict household protocols that Victoria had once instituted. In their place was a more relaxed atmosphere, with voices and even occasional laughter, echoing through rooms that had previously known only hushed tones and careful conversations. Maxwell stood in his home office, now transformed into a shared workspace, reviewing blueprints spread across what had once been his executive desk. Beside him, Tyler pointed excitedly at various sections of the drawing, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. See, Dad, if we put the community garden here, it gets the best sunlight, and over here could be the technology center where kids can learn coding and robotics after school. Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. Good thinking, and it's walking distance. From the middle school, which means more students can access it easily. He made a note on the margin of the blueprint. Let's present these changes to the committee next week. The Harrison Foundation for Educational Opportunity had become Maxwell's primary focus since stepping down as CEO of Harrison Investments. Using a substantial portion of his personal fortune, he had established the foundation with a mission to provide resources and opportunities to children from underprivileged backgrounds. The community center they were currently designing would be its flagship project, a state-of-the-art facility in one of Bridgeport's most underserved neighborhoods. Mr. Harrison? Lucia appeared in the doorway, no longer in her former uniform but dressed in business casual attire. The teacher representatives from Bridgeport Public Schools have arrived for our meeting. Thank you, Lucia. We'll be right there. Maxwell straightened, adjusting his open-collared shirt. The perfectly tailored power suits that had once been his daily armor now hung largely unused in his closet. As Lucia turned to leave, Maxwell called after her. And Lucia, did Elena confirm that she can join us for dinner tonight? A warm smile spread across Lucia's face. Yes, she'll be here at 7. She's very excited to share her new project ideas with Tyler. Tyler punched the air triumphantly. Yes, I've been working on coding questions all week to ask her. After Lucia left, Maxwell guided Tyler toward the door with a gentle hand on his shoulder. Remember, you promised to help set the table for dinner tonight. These meetings usually run about an hour. I know, Tyler said, with the mild impatience of a child who had heard the same reminder multiple times. Mom already reminded me this morning before she left for her class. Maxwell smiled at the mention of Victoria. His wife had surprised everyone, perhaps even herself, with how she had adapted to their new circumstances. After the initial shock and adjustment period following Maxwell's professional downfall, Victoria had discovered an unexpected passion for art history, a subject she had studied in college before being swept into the social obligations of a financial magnate's wife. She was now pursuing a master's degree, with plans to eventually work in museum education. The changes in their family hadn't happened overnight, nor had they come without conflict and struggle. The weeks following the East Westlake catastrophe had been among the most challenging of Maxwell's life. The financial press had been merciless, former colleagues had distanced themselves, and invitations to the elite social events that had once filled their calendar had dwindled to near nothing. Victoria had initially reacted with anger and fear, her carefully constructed identity as Mrs. Maxwell Harrison, social luminary and corporate wife, suddenly in jeopardy. Their arguments during that period had been intense, laying bare years of unacknowledged tensions and unmet expectations on both sides. But somewhere amid the wreckage of his former life, Maxwell had found something unexpected: clarity. The night spent talking with Lucia during the power outage had been a catalyst, forcing him to re-examine what truly mattered. The subsequent weeks had been a painful but necessary process of rebuilding, not just his professional identity, but his understanding of success and, most importantly, his relationships with his family. The meeting with the Bridgeport teachers proved both productive and enlightening. Maxwell found himself genuinely engaged as they discussed the educational challenges facing their students and how the new community center might address those needs. These conversations were so different from the corporate boardroom discussions that had dominated his previous life, focused not on profit margins and market share, but on tangible ways to improve children's futures. As the meeting concluded, and Maxwell showed the teachers out, he noticed Tyler in the kitchen, carefully setting the dining table under Lucia's guidance. The boy had grown noticeably in the past few months, not just physically but in confidence and character. His science fair project on cleaning solutions had won first place, with both Maxwell and Victoria in attendance to witness his proud moment. "That's perfect, Tyler," Lucia was saying as she checked his work. "Just remember that the water glass goes above the knife." "Like this?" Tyler adjusted the glassware, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Exactly right," Lucia nodded approvingly. Maxwell paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. "Looks like you've got a natural talent for this, son." Tyler looked up with a grin. "Lucia says attention to detail matters in everything we do, whether it's setting a table or building a robot." "Lucia is very wise," Maxwell agreed, exchanging a warm glance with the woman who had transitioned from housekeeper to the Harrison Foundation's Director of Community Outreach. Her experience as an educator, combined with her deep understanding of the challenges faced by immigrant and lower-income families, had made her an invaluable asset to the Foundation's work. The sound of the front door opening announced Victoria's return. She entered the kitchen moments later, her arms full of textbooks and a portfolio case. "The modernism seminar ran long," she explained, setting her academic burden on a side table. "Professor Levine got into a fascinating tangent about Kandinsky's color theory." Her eyes were bright with intellectual engagement, a stark contrast to the polished but restrained enthusiasm she had once reserved for charity galas and social events. "Need a hand with dinner?" she asked Lucia, already reaching for an apron. Another change that would have been unthinkable in their previous life, when Victoria had rarely set foot in the kitchen except to issue instructions to the staff. "Everything's under control," Lucia assured her. "The lasagna needs another 20 minutes, and Eleanor should be here by then." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Tyler abandoned his table-setting duties and raced to the door, calling over his shoulder, "It's her, I'll get it." Moments later, Elena Martinez entered the kitchen, greeted by Tyler's excited chatter about his latest coding project. At 23, Eleanor carried herself with quiet confidence, her resemblance to her mother evident in both appearance and demeanor. Her MIT diploma now hung proudly in Lucia's apartment in the renovated carriage house on the Harrison property, an arrangement that had developed naturally as Lucia's role in both the foundation and the family had evolved. "I brought dessert," Elena announced, setting a bakery box on the counter. "Churros from that place in New Haven you liked so much last time, Mr. Harrison." "Maxwell, please," he reminded her with a smile. "And thank you. They're Tyler's favorite, too." "Only because you introduced them to me," Tyler piped up. "Before that, I didn't even know what churros were." The evening unfolded with a warmth and authenticity that the Harrison mansion had rarely known in its previous incarnation as a showcase of wealth and status. Over dinner, they discussed the Foundation's projects, Elena's new job at a tech startup focused on educational software, Victoria's studies, and Tyler's latest inventions. Penelope, now attending NYU and unable to join them that evening, was nevertheless present in spirit as they shared updates from her recent phone call, describing her excitement about an upcoming theatre production she was stage managing. After dinner, as the adults lingered over coffee and Tyler disappeared upstairs to retrieve something he wanted to show Elena, Maxwell found himself reflecting on the journey of the past few months. His financial empire had crumbled, his professional reputation had been tarnished, and many of the people he had once considered friends had drifted away. By all the metrics that had previously defined his success, he should be devastated. Yet sitting there, watching Victoria animatedly discuss art history with Elena while Lucia added insightful comments, Maxwell realized he had never felt more genuinely successful in his life. The hollowness that had plagued him even at the height of his corporate power had been filled with something far more substantial: genuine connections, meaningful work, and a renewed sense of purpose. Tyler bounded back into the room, carrying a small device constructed from what appeared to be recycled electronics and 3D printed components. "Elena, look, I finished it," he exclaimed, setting the contraption on the table. "It's the automated plant watering system I told you about. It measures soil moisture and dispenses exactly the right amount of water when needed." Elena examined the device with genuine interest, asking detailed questions about the coding and engineering challenges Tyler had overcome. Maxwell watched his son explain his creation with pride, noting how Tyler's natural intelligence was now flourishing in an environment where it was truly valued rather than merely directed toward predetermined outcomes. Later that evening, after Eleanor had departed with promises to return the following weekend, and Tyler had finally been persuaded to go to bed, Maxwell and Victoria sat together on the terrace, enjoying the mild spring evening. Lucia had also retired to her apartment, leaving the couple alone with their thoughts and each other. "I ran into Catherine Woodward at the university today," Victoria said after a comfortable silence. "She barely acknowledged me. I think she's still processing the fact that I'm actually studying, rather than just funding a wing of the art building." Maxwell chuckled. "The social fallout continues. Does it bother you?" Victoria considered the question with a thoughtfulness that had become characteristic of her in recent months. "Strangely, no. I find I don't miss those superficial connections as much as I thought I would." She took a sip of her herbal tea. "The friends who've remained, the real ones, more than make up for those who disappeared when our circumstances changed." Maxwell nodded in agreement, thinking of James Whitman, who had stood by him throughout the crisis and continued to involve him as a consultant on key decisions at Harrison Investments. "It's been quite the filtering process." "Speaking of filtering," Victoria said, "Penelope mentioned that she's thinking of changing her major from business to education. She seemed nervous about telling you." Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "Did you tell her I'd be delighted? Education seems to be becoming the family business after all." Victoria smiled, reaching over to take his hand. "I told her to talk to you. Herself. I think she needs to hear your support directly." Maxwell squeezed her hand in response, marveling at how their relationship had deepened through the crucible of crisis. They had been forced to see each other anew, to recognize strengths and vulnerabilities that had been obscured by their former roles. The result was a partnership far more genuine than the carefully choreographed marriage they had maintained for so many years. "I was thinking," Maxwell said after another comfortable silence, "about expanding the Foundation's focus to include adult education programs. There are so many talented people like Lucia who come to this country with valuable skills and education, but face barriers to continuing their professions." Victoria nodded enthusiastically. "That's a wonderful idea. I might have some contacts through the university who could help develop the curriculum." Her expression grew reflective. "It's ironic, isn't it? You've probably made more meaningful impact in the past 3 months than in all your years running Harrison Investments." "Different kind of impact," Maxwell acknowledged. "But yes, it feels more substantial somehow." He looked out over the darkened garden, remembering the man he had been just a few months earlier, successful by every external measure, yet internally hollow. "I keep thinking about something Lucia said that night during the storm. About dignity not being something circumstances give or take away, but coming from how we face those circumstances." "She's a remarkable woman," Victoria said softly, We're fortunate she chose to stay with us through all of this. We are, Maxwell agreed. Though I like to think it's no longer just employment that keeps her here, but genuine connection and shared purpose. As they sat together in the peaceful evening, Maxwell reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. His professional disgrace had been the catalyst for personal redemption, forcing him to confront the emptiness at the core of his former life and discover a more meaningful definition of success. The irony wasn't lost on him. In losing everything he had once valued, he had gained what he truly needed. Inside the house, a framed photograph now held the place of honor on Maxwell's desk. Not the old image of him and his father in their too formal suits, but a new one taken at Tyler's science fair. In it, the entire family stood together around Tyler's award-winning project, their smiles genuine and their pride palpable. Lucia and Elena stood with them, not as staff but as valued members of their extended family. It was a visual representation of Maxwell's new understanding of true wealth, not measured in dollars or status symbols, but in meaningful connections and genuine purpose. Maxwell Harrison had finally learned the lesson that his son had intuited naturally, and that Lucia had understood all along. That dignity comes not from position or possessions, but from how we treat others and the values we embody. His financial empire had fallen, but from its ruins he had built something far more valuable, a life of authentic success and genuine connection. As Victoria leaned her head against his shoulder in the gathering darkness, Maxwell felt a deep contentment that no business triumph had ever provided. The path forward wasn't entirely clear, and challenges undoubtedly remained, but for perhaps the first time in his adult life, Maxwell Harrison was truly rich in all the ways that mattered. And that, he now understood, was the greatest success of all. Fim da Historia. Valued friends, we hope that Maxwell and Tyler's journey through wealth, pride, and redemption has touched your hearts. To continue experiencing stories that explore the true meaning of success and the power of human connection, we've created a special playlist with equally captivating narratives just for you. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If this tale of transformation spoke to you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that delve into life's complexities and the unexpected lessons we learn along the way. We can't wait to share more with you. Join us in the comments section to share your thoughts on Maxwell's journey from material wealth to meaningful connection.